Michigan Wolverine!
AppStateCentral.com weekly podcast. All right, good evening and welcome to the fourth installment of the AppStateCentral.com weekly podcast. As always, a big thank you to the Marching Mountaineers and the Appalachian Sports Network for providing those sound clips you just heard. Unfortunately, I had to go back to the standard Miracle on the Mountain and Michigan win sound clips. I know I shouldn't be complaining because all of our fans that just went to ECU know about the heat, but my air conditioner broke yesterday, so I've been sitting in the heat with the air conditioner repair guy and didn't have a chance to bring in the ECU clips into the intro, so I apologize for that. This is Bryden, and along with my co-host, Mike. And unfortunately, as I just spoke about in Greenville, the Mountaineers took a tough loss to ECU. And tonight we'll go over some of the positives and concerns that we saw from that game, and then turn our focus to a huge non-conference matchup as Montana visits the High Country this Saturday at the Rock at 6:30. And to help us talk about that Montana matchup, we have Brent Wahlberg, who will be joining us, and he writes weekly previews and practice reports for the fans on egriz.com. And he also has had his rivalry preview published in several of the local newspapers up in Montana. So he's a very established Montana fan. So we're happy to have him on board to talk to us about that. And before we get into that, Mike, just give our listeners a little reminder about how to contact us via the social media.
Yes, as always, if you want to interact with us during the show, you can send us a tweet at AppStateCentral or post on the Facebook wall at facebook.com/AppStateCentral. We love to hear from anyone who visits the site or listens to the podcast. So if you're at your computer, and you have a second, please give us a shout.
Yeah, definitely, and please let us know. We're on Twitter and Facebook as we speak. So please let us know, and we'll get back to you. And who knows, maybe give you a shout out on air. So let's go ahead and let's start from going over the unfortunate loss of this past weekend in Greenville. The Mountaineers fell by a final score of 35-13. In a game that was extremely tight for three quarters and much more competitive than that final score would indicate. It was basically a back and forth battle until the fourth quarter, and seemingly their ECU's depth with the extra scholarships and the heat just wearing down our players, I think, was the issue, as well as a few mistakes we made. So, Mike, what did you see from the team that you liked and that you didn't like?
Well, as you said, I think the game was a lot closer than that 35-13 final. That 35-15 final score really indicates. This was it's a game that all things considered, with the suspensions before the game and the injuries during the game, I really liked the way our team fought. I think they did very well to make this such a tight game for three quarters on the road in that kind of heat. The first thing that I was really, really pleased with, kind of in taking from the loss, was the performance of the offensive line. And, with a new offensive line coach in there and some of the problems that unit had last year, that's something that a lot of the App fans have talked about a lot in the offseason. And, to start with, Jamal Jackson dropped back to pass 40 times, and they didn't surrender one sack against an ECU front seven that is very strong, especially in the middle. So I thought that was definitely a positive to take from it. I think that as a group, they're coming along. They still have a little bit of work to do in terms of run blocking. But as we'll talk about later, there's some other factors that kind of hurt us in the run game as well. And also Jamal Jackson, I thought he had a very solid performance. He was 23 of 40. He passed for 300 yards. Also had a rushing touchdown. Unfortunately, also did have a costly interception late. When App was kind of on their last leg, making a drive, trying to get back into the game. And but otherwise, I thought he was very sharp. He looked good. Like you expect in the opener, there was I don't know if it was jitters or just kind of getting used to the speed of actual live game action. He missed a couple of receivers, but overall, I thought he played very well, and the Appalachian defense showed up great. We held East Carolina to 390 total yards, and on the day, Appalachian actually outgained East Carolina 419 to 390, and even though ECU ended up with 35 points on the board, they only scored 3 offensive touchdowns, and one of those was set up by a punt return that was ran back inside the 15. So in terms of actual long touchdown drives, East Carolina was only able to put together 2 on the day, and both of those came at the end of the third and beginning of the fourth quarter when we were pretty worn down by that point. kind of keeping on topic of the one short field they were given that led to a touchdown. On the flip side of things, I was very disappointed in the performance of the special teams. That's something where with Coach Mark Ivy coming in and us trying to take a little more, pay a little more attention to that unit, and have a coach that dedicates more of his time to coaching that group. I think it's something we still have. There's the ability out there that we can improve on, but it was really disappointing. It always hurts when your offense and your defense go out there and, especially when you're giving up those 22 scholarships and playing in front of 50,000 fans on such a hot day. And they really did, until the very, very end, went toe-to-toe with East Carolina offensively and defensively. But, giving up a 90-yard kick return for a touchdown, and that was a real backbreaker because Appalachian, if you recall, that was a 1-point game at that time. We had just kicked a field goal to cut the deficit to 14-13, and Sam Martin came up a little short on the kickoff. It was fielded at the 10. He took it back 90 yards to the house and broke a couple tackles along the way, and that was a huge momentum swing. And then also the other deep punt return that got them down inside the 15 to give them their first lead in the first half. Broke a 7-7 tie, in which we ended up making 14-10 before the half. But that was really the biggest disappointment on the field. It had to be the special teams. They really did cost us. That's something we've got to fix going forward. And one thing though is just where the East Carolina depth really shine through. Whereas they've got scholarship athletes who have been resting on the sideline to come in and play special teams. We've either got to put our starters on special teams who are out there and are tired, or we've got to have guys that either are very inexperienced or walk-ons out there playing special teams. That's one area where their depth really showed through. And then obviously the disappointment of before the game is something that had kind of been rumored throughout the offseason that they might not be playing, and ended up coming to fruition where it was announced shortly before kickoff that our number one wide receiver, Sean Price, starting free safety Jamil Lott, and Jamal Ware, who definitely would have gotten some work in the linebacker rotation, were suspended for violating team rules. They'll be out 2 games, and that's also gonna put them out against Montana this weekend. So that's another thing that was pretty disappointing, and it might not have necessarily had a huge factor in the outcome, but it is still something as a fan, to see. We have, we're kind of seemed like the odds were stacked against us enough to begin with, and we had enough that we had to overcome, and kind of having that thrown at us there at the last minute was a little frustrating as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was frustrating to see. I remembered right before going over to my buddy's place to watch the game. I unfortunately was not in Greenville, but before I was heading over to my buddy's game, I saw that they were suspended, and that was very frustrating to see. But on the flip side of that, we got to see true freshman Malachi Jones, who was Sean Price's replacement, and he looked really good. I'm not exactly sure what his stats were. I believe he had 6 catches for 60-something yards, I believe. And so he looked really good, and one of those catches was an acrobatic catch on the sideline. And so I'm really, really pleased to see how he's doing, and shows that we do have depth at the receiver position as well. I mean, obviously we got Decoy Sumler, who should pose a threat to defenses for us with his speed, and he didn't get a whole lot of playing time either. So we do have depth there. And then the other frustrating thing for me, as Mike said, was the special teams. And not necessarily their play. Yeah, their play definitely did frustrate me. There's no doubt about it. But the one thing that caught me was the one time we had great punt coverage, it was called a penalty. So you gotta, it was a questionable call, but still you gotta know what's a penalty and what's not when you're on the punt coverage team. And so not only do we let one punt coverage go deep into our territory, but we also let a kickoff go and then had a penalty on a play that looked like they probably lost yards on the return. So that was very frustrating. And the other frustrating part was injuries. Unfortunately, we had added insult to the injuries. As Rod Chisholm and Doug Middleton left in the game, and will each miss significant time. Chisholm had surgery on a broken hand and will miss 4 to 6 weeks. And Doug Middleton, he had surgery on his ankle, and he's going to miss the remainder of the 2012 campaign. So that's definitely kick to our secondary, as well as our running back. Obviously, Chisholm being a starter at running back, and he actually looked really good before he went down to injury. And then Middleton, who's kind of forced into the role of cornerback, started at cornerback opposite of Demetrius McCray when Blackman went down for the year. And as you and I were talking about earlier today, Mike, the good thing about if there's a silver lining of Middleton's injury, is Blackman is supposed to be an amazing cornerback, and we know Middleton has the potential to be an amazing quarterback. So the silver lining there is we're going to have both of those guys for at least 3 more years, barring any more injuries to either of them. And so our cornerback and our defensive back should be solid for at least 3 more years to come after this season. But with these injuries, Mike, how do you think that's going to affect the depth as we prepare for Montana?
Well, I mean, I think it will be interesting to see. The coaches have got some options. First off, at running back, and I think that a lot of the coaches were hoping that, with if we were able to get a full healthy year, productive and healthy year out of both Rod Chisholm and Stephen Miller, that they'd kind of had the luxury of being able to redshirt true freshman Tyshawn Holloway. And it's going to depend if they kind of want to stick to their guns and do that, or if they're going to put him in there. It's possible that he could have that he could see action starting this weekend, and they'll kind of forego that the plan to redshirt him. In my opinion, I think they should. I really hope that they do, because Stephen Miller, he will be counted on to play an even larger role now that Rod's going down for the next month or so. But he's, at 5'8", 180 pounds, he's got great speed. He's dangerous in the open field. He's the kind of guy you'd love to, throw swing passes to, get him to the outside, get him in open space. But he just doesn't have the frame to be an every down back that's going to, be moving the ball between the tackles. And, Tyshawn Holloway, he's a bigger kid. He's 6'1", about 200 pounds. He's a real powerful runner. He's someone that could do that job. And obviously he was a very highly touted, very highly regarded freshman coming out of high school. He turned down offers from Duke and North Carolina and Georgia Tech to come and play here. And I know he wants to get on the field. He wouldn't have turned down those offers to come here if he wasn't looking to get on the field early. And I'm really hoping he gets his shot. You always hate to lose somebody, especially somebody like Rod, who's been through as much as he has, and worked as hard as he has to get back on the field and get eligible, and really looked like he was ready to turn the corner this year. You hate to see him go down, but we do at least have some talent behind him, and you'd like to see the freshman get his shot. I do think it's possible Michael Frazier could get some reps as well. He's another big, powerful guy that could also play the role of that short yardage back, and kind of give us those tough yards when we need them. But I'm just not sure that he's as good at an overall back at this point as Tyshawn Holloway. He's a converted linebacker, very powerful, very tough. Doesn't quite have the same top end speed, and vision is not quite as much of a natural running back as Tyshawn Holloway is. So that'll be very interesting to see. I think if Tyshawn Holloway gets slid into the lineup, then I'm not going to say we won't miss a beat, but we're still going to be able to, I think, be productive on the ground. Whereas, if we try to have, Stephen Miller and Ricky Ferguson and Michael Frazier in there as the only options, we could struggle to move it on the ground some.
Definitely. With that, sorry to cut you off there. With that, I mean, the thing with Stephen Miller and Ferguson is they're both similar runners in the fact that they're both speedy, quick, and they're not up the middle, where exactly what you said Holloway brings that, where you can bust it up the middle if needed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Ferguson, he's another guy. He's a true freshman. He's a walk-on. He does have good speed. He's another guy that you'd love to see what he can